The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everyone. My name is David Gross with Conde Systems, and it's my privilege and honor to be with you during this webinar. And Jimmy Lamb will also be with us. Jimmy, how are you today?
Hey, I am doing wonderful here, David, and very much looking forward to our webinar together today.
So Jimmy and I have a lot of fun talk about industry trends and how we can help you be successful. And I would say, Jimmy, can we really ever even touch the concepts because there are so many?
That's true.
So we were just having a conversation about the success of our sublimation markers and how it's sort of a different dimension, if you will, to add to sublimation. And of course, you know, the sublimation markers with the subject we're talking here, you know, it's pretty amazing because you could do a hand drawing with the markers and sublimate it to some of this interior signage and have a really, you would say, a handmade product, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, and it really is. It's handmade and it's actually fun. I mean, it's so many applications I could see with that. Just, you know, when we've talked before, like, you know, fundraising and kids artwork, I mean, now you don't have to have the kids draw something on paper, then take a picture of it, and then get the background cut out. I mean, they can just go ahead and do it, you know, take the sublimation markers, draw their own picture, you know, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, so just the rules, I'm sure many of you have been part of our webinars before, is you're in listen-only mode, and we would love to hear from you through your questions. You can send us a question, and then we will answer the question if we can when you ask it. Otherwise, we'll wait to the end of the webinar and have the Q&A. And then there may be a few questions that are best handled after the webinar ends. We will also post the webinar recording on Conde TV, where it will live essentially forever. Many of Jimmy's webinars with us, Jimmy, they're 6, 7, 8 years old, oh, yeah. I bet.
Yes, they are.
And some of them live a very, very long life, like our pricing webinars, things like that, one of our favorite subjects. And I really like today's subject, which is on interior signs, because I think maybe our last webinar together, the webinar before that, was on selling into the hospitality industry, or,
right,
or focused on B&B, bed and breakfast stuff, and those kinds of accounts are also very rich opportunities for today's subject.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to add, that's one of the really neat things about sublimation, the fact that we can do so many wide ranging products. You know, because sublimation makes you a sign maker, it makes you an awards provider, it can make you a promotional products distributor. So so many things we can do with it, but definitely today, the sign market. And I like signs for a lot of reasons. For one thing, a lot of signage is high margin products. So that gives us the opportunity to really make some good revenue off of, you know, producing signs for different organizations.
Well, Jimmy, lead us on.
Okay, so, you know, I always start by looking at just the potential, just kind of talking about it. And, you know, one of the things that most of us already know right off the bat is that sublimation is not UV resistant. Now, we are seeing products coming out now that have an increased resistance or increased fade resistance, such as Chromolux EXT. And anything can be used outside, okay? It is going to fade, but how long it takes to fade is really going to be a factor of how intense is the sun for how many hours per day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like you wake up one day and you go outside and the sign faded. You know, it fades naturally.
With the outdoor metals we have today, with the existing printers, the Unisub / Chromolux exterior products, I would say would deliver a very solid 3-year life.
Right.
Potentially longer for graphics, because when graphic fades, you really can't remember what it used to look like.
That's true.
When photographs fade, especially if they contain flesh tones, usually the fading will be in the magenta, giving the photograph a little bit of a cyan tint. So that's it. But bottom line is, I would say that to a very large extent, sublimation has definitely gone outdoors.
Yep. And just a couple of things to add in. Almost every process out there fades in direct sunlight over time. If you really go and look, I mean, if you paint your house, it's going to fade over time. So the key, I think, in all of this is the expectation of the customer. If we tell our customer that, yes, if we're using the EXT product, you can probably get a good 3 years out of it. It could be longer. It really depends, again, on the intensity. If the customer expectation is in alignment with the fading of the product, then there is no anger necessarily on their part when it fades, because the expectation was there. So I do always believe anytime you do anything for outdoors, the key is making sure that your customer is aware that, like every other process, pretty much is going to fade over time.
And what I say is, when you get into your artwork design, if you build in some we'll call it intentional obsolescence, and that may seem like a harsh statement, but for instance, Jimmy, let's say we design into artwork that we're doing a product or service that the company is pushing that's new, then they're going to be ready to change it anyway, because things have changed.
Right.
And so to some extent, with the interior signage market and really spilling over to the exterior, you want to become that marketing consultant for them, and instead of just simply, just doing what they ask you to do, like a mindless, robot.
Right.
Even though robots are starting to get very, very smart.
That's true.
You want to think about how best you can help them be successful with their business, because guess what? If you help them grow your business, then there's a good likelihood that they'll probably need some more products, and there's a higher likelihood that they would recommend you to other folks.
Yes. So like I said, I wanted to start off just kind of addressing the exterior applications. As you see here on the slide, we're talking about interior signage, but your signage can be used exterior. It just, making sure everyone, realizes that little aspect. But there are so many applications for interior-based signs. And if we look out there, almost every organization uses some form of signage, much of it rather boring, to be honest, but people do use signage for instructions and directions, etc. When we look at a sublimated sign, I mean, the versatility and the durability of sublimation is such that it should be a long-lasting product if it's not being bombarded by the direct sunlight. But as David said, many times signs just become obsolete and do have to be replaced. And then the other aspect is that we can do graphics and photos. And the reality is people do better with pictures than having to read a lot of text. So that becomes an important aspect as well, that we can put some really good photography in there if needed, as well as the graphics too.
And you're 100% right, Jimmy. The way I would put it is that as we certainly grow older or whatever, making signs easier to understand and comprehend quickly certainly helps. And so, for instance, an icon that sort of explains what's going on is just super helpful, along with the words. Some people like graphics better, some people like words. And I've now seen examples, and I think you're going to show us a few here, where with some some eye-catching graphics. It's sort of like if anyone flies American Airlines, they play a little safety video. Have you seen that,
Yes, I
Jimmy?
have.
I'm sure you have.
As all
Where
those
they're
people marching
making
around.
Yeah, well, they make the safety video extremely entertaining,
Right.
to the point of funny, ridiculous, almost like a comedy. And, you know, you just got to watch it because you're going, what are these people going to do next?
Yep.
And that's the name of the game is we're all really marketing consultants. We just happen to be delivering products in full color photographic quality. And they're super high value products.
Yes. David, speaking of that, I just got a question that I want to share with you. Is there a material that you can sublimate on to be used as a car magnet? You know how the car magnet signs are you see on the doors of cars a lot of time? So they're wondering if there's some type of large car magnet signage type of product that can be sublimated.
The answer is no and no, and here's why. So the physics of sublimation is that when the sublimation dyes get hot, they're seeking a new home, and I've actually seen people that put sublimated magnet kind of material on their car, and when they take it off, the sublimation ink is migrated into the clear coat of the car. And so to the extent sublimation ink, when it gets hot, it's like water. There's no stopping it. Like a flood or rising water or a hurricane, you can't stop it. So using sublimation on the side of your car for signage would be an absolute no-no. And there's relatively few no-nos in sublimation, but that's one that unfortunately I have seen and witnessed myself. And so so that would not be a good thing. What would be an appropriate technology for that in general would be a solvent-based printer, printing on vinyl, and then backing the vinyl with a piece of magnet material. That would be an excellent way to create a car sign.
Yeah, okay. All right, so the visual benefit of sublimation, as I was mentioning with the photos and the graphics, we can really make things interesting. We can bring things to life, eye-catching graphics, you know, and these things become very important because, you know, David made a great point with the American Airlines video. Signs that grab your attention are useful for A, delivering an important message like maybe a safety message. B, branding, because if we're suddenly looking at something because it caught our attention and now we're seeing a product, a service, or a brand, you know, that did a great job of getting a customer to connect. Okay, so there's lots of reasons why we really should have those type of images. You know, there's a couple of simple things down here. If you look on the one on the left, you know, this would be obviously in a coffee shop or a restaurant or something where they actually have a picture of a food product. Because a lot of times when we read the definition of the food, that we kind of know what it is, we don't really know the quality of their food or anything else. So they have a picture. It does a couple of things. That A, tells you, hey, this is what the product looks like. You're like, oh, that looks pretty good. Okay, and then B, hopefully it is not only confirming, you know, what the product is, but also an appetizing picture to make you feel the need to buy it. So we can actually kind of control people's actions by what we're placing on the signage, and that becomes a good selling point for you when you're talking to your client. You know, instead of just having text, having a picture to go along with it.
Yeah, it's just as easy to do a dull sign as it is to do something exciting.
That's a great point. You know, I realized that a long time ago that it's just as easy to do dull and boring as it is exciting, and the cost is pretty much the same too. You know, it doesn't cost more to do something exciting at all, but you can probably charge more, you see, because of the perception of value.
Amen, brother, and that should be repeated, that the better looking, the higher value, and that's where that marketing consultant comes into play, is how do you make something valuable? Well, there are a couple of ways to do it, but one of the ways is through your artwork, and you sit down and you think a little bit about what's going to really be the most benefit to the client.
Right. This next shot here, this was something that we actually staged because we wanted to show people just how much sublimation we could put into, in this case, a coffee shop setting. And
that is awesome. That is absolutely.
It goes beyond just the signage, but I mean, there's not much in here that wasn't sublimated. I mean, you look at, and this is important because if you're in talking to a restaurant, for example, coffee shop, ice cream shop, whatever else, when you can go in with this many different product concepts to start talking to them about, you can probably take what might have been a very small order and make it a whole lot larger. And everything in here was done with Sawgrass inks and Sawgrass printers. I mean, even the waitress, she's sublimated visor, sublimated shirt, sublimated apron.
Jimmy, I think I see a sublimated tattoo on her.
Yeah, I think you're right. So we got all these things. But one of my favorite things, and this is something you would have to do on a VJ. Okay, I love the tabletops. I think the cafe tabletops are just absolutely awesome that Chromolux makes.
And that is a product that you can get through us through our fulfillment services, and I would say it's still pretty much a well-kept secret that it's very easy to do a sublimated tabletop, and then you just attach the feet to it and you're good.
That's right. When you look at the back, you'll see there's a really large sign back there, and you're saying, there's no way you guys did that on your VJ, okay? And we did, because the actuality is these are multiple panels. That the graphic was created to make it look like one panel, but it's actually 3 different panels that are 24-inch wide by 36-inch long. So a VJ could do it, or as David said, I mean, with his fulfillment division, he could take care of that for you as well.
Yeah, we in the old days, certainly, we even played games with multiple sublimation to a larger substrate. But yeah, it's very easy, and it has some benefit to your client as well, because instead of replacing the entire display, you can make it modular,
right?
Where you would only replace certain parts, and then you could even add another section. I'm sure in your presentations, I recall we talk about dry erase, but most of these substrates are perfect for dry erase. And dry erase gives you the ability, of course, to have that daily special, or what soups do we have today. We all know the routine, and certainly that is an awesome feature of sublimation.
Yep. So, real quick, I just want to talk about the different Sawgrass printers and how they can help you with signage, because signage is, a lot of times we think signage, we think it has to be a giant billboard, and it doesn't have to be, but obviously the larger an image, the larger the text, the easier it is to read, okay? So if you want to get into making signage and decide to make that a really important part of what you're doing with your business, it is important to understand the printer options. And I like that David has the fulfillment, because that's a great way to be able, maybe you have an 800, an SG 800, and you're taking care of a certain level of products, and then they say, hey, well, we need some really big panels, and then you can call Conde and say, hey, I need a little help here, and that keeps you from having to jump into, a big investment of equipment. But by the same token, depending on what it is that you're doing on a daily basis, you may be looking that it's time to move up to a little bit larger printer. So I just want to touch base real quick on what the 3 printers are, and kind of talk about what we can do with them in terms of signage. So our SG 400, which is the most popular one, Can do an 8.5 by 14 standard sheet of paper. And if you had a bypass tray, you can do, what is it, 8.5 by 51, I believe, David. What's your largest sheet of paper you make that you could run through the 400?
So if you purchase the bypass tray, you can print longer, and so I cut paper to 8.5 by 21.
Okay.
So, and the goal there would be you're trying to max out a 21-inch, 20-inch heat press, like say a DK20S 16 by 20. Favorite applications there are things like lanyards or neckties, but it could be anything that is a little bit longer, and you know, maybe you have an SG400 and you're not interested in getting a second printer. There's lots of things, like I have a new panoramic Chromolux metal that you can curve and turn it into an S-curve and make a great counter display, I might add, because it's self-standing. So you could decorate maybe a few pictures of you know, things that are going on in that business or whatever, or have just a beautiful panoramic scene. Certainly you can imagine something like that sitting at the a bed and breakfast check-in.
Yeah, and while you're talking about curved, when I was having dinner with your staff this summer, and the menu that had been put on the curved acrylic,
yes,
that
absolutely.
was just stunning. I mean, right there
Slam
on the table.
dunk.
Yep.
So if you think about all the places where you need to have some visual displays, and you want to do it in such a way like that American Airlines video to capture your attention, see something unique, the acrylic does that, and it's curved, and you could, you know, use any sort of information. It could be a menu, but it could be, you know, sort of what's happening this week or this month. So, you know, you got lots of options with trying to communicate.
Yes. Okay, so my main point there was, if you're an SG400, yes, you can do some signage products. So we don't want you to feel like you have to have something gigantic, right? If you have the 800, which is standard media size of 11 by 17, if you have the bypass tray, you can do a sheet of 13 by 19. And then, David, what is your largest cut paper for the SG800?
So we described the 800 is with the bypass tray is 13 by 21. Okay. 19, you know, was a legacy thing from the days of the Epson, and what fits the needs of your typical 16 by 20 heat press is 13 by 21. Right. And that's what I recommend. Interestingly enough, we also cut a paper to go in the bottom tray that is 11.75 by 17. So for people that are doing full bleed 11-inch items, you can continue to use the bottom tray. And so again, one of the things we are is we're here to exploit the technology so that it can be the most valuable for you.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Okay. In addition to everything that the 400 can do,
going back, you can feed a very long piece of paper through the bypass tray also.
Yep. In addition to what the 400 can do, we also can now start moving into wall panels, larger flags, maybe even small architectural pieces. We're going to show you a lot of pictures of some of these different types of products here in just a few minutes, so you have a better idea of what some of these might be when you talk about architectural, for example. Okay, and then the third printer is the VJ628, and the V628 is a roll feed printer, and it'll actually do, you can do full bleed of 24 inches with this because it has a paper that's wider than that, but it allows you to do a true 24-inch, you know, image if you need that for products. There's a lot of products that are cut to 24 inches. So here, because you have a continuous roll feed, you can do some pretty long stuff, okay? So now we start talking about large wall panels, bigger architectural pieces, banners, the tabletop units like we saw in that image a few minutes ago. Then we actually start looking at some of the fabric panels as well, because a lot of times signage is done on fabrics, stretch fabrics. So there's a lot going on with that. But as David was saying, if you just need to have them handle that for you, that they can take care of it too.
And then the LED light frames that are fabric, you know, front fabric are incredibly popular. So, you know, point of purchase signage, things like that.
Now, if you do move into something larger with a printer, you need a larger heat press, obviously. Once you get into something like the VJ, you're definitely going to look for something bigger than a 16 by 20 heat press. And there are some different options out there. I know, David, you guys carry a lot of different options with heat presses.
Yeah, so certainly, if possible, for most folks, I would recommend the George Knight DK20S, 16 by 20 swing away, lifetime warranty on the heat platen, just built like a tank. Would or should outlast your lifetime. And but as you go bigger, we can certainly listen to your needs and recommend. The press on the left is the DK32, and that's a 26 by 32 inch press, and that press was actually designed for the VJ628 to be a good fit, to allow you to do larger Chromlux panels, car mats, pillowcases, those kinds of things. And then you can move beyond that into larger printers and larger heat presses. But what I tell everybody, before you spend a lot of money on these things, you should test your business plan by outsourcing it to someone.
Right.
We do have some outsourcing services here, but in many cases, we would refer you to one of our clients that is, quote, quote, open for business, so that you can make sure you understand what your return on your investment is, so that you can make the best decisions.
Absolutely. The final one on the show is I like to show things to explain things to people, but I know a lot of people don't go the path of a calendar press, but I just think a calendar press is so neat in what it does that I always like to show one when I can, because even someone who's never going to go beyond their 400 or 800, having knowledge of how some of these things work is pretty cool. And a calendar press is typically used for doing printed fabric, where you have the paper, because we've set them up before in some trade shows where we're having the paper feed out of the printer, kind of going in on one side of this press, while at the same time we have fabric coming in, and the two made up, you know, together, and they go through a set of heated rollers, and the combination of the heated rollers, the heat from the rollers, and the pressure is essentially making this a giant heat press that's in motion. And then out the other end, you have the printed fabric coming away and the paper falling away from it. So it's not the type of product that most people are going to ever probably purchase in their sublimation career, but it's pretty cool to know that it's there. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, those kind of, you know, a lot of people would think they're glorified laminators, but they're very hot. They have precision manufacturing, and they're for folks that want to do big bolts of fabric. It could
Right.
be fabric backdrops at trade shows. That kind of business really is very strong right now. The economy is doing well, that kind of stuff. But I would say for the vast majority of people, outsourcing would be an appropriate option because of just the space required, the investments. But once you sort of learn the business and the money's coming in, then absolutely, go vertical.
Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and move into some of the cool things that we can make, okay? Because I think that's what most people really want to see is ideas and concepts. So as we all know, that sublimated signs come in a lot of different forms, and one of the things you've already said it, and it's the type of thing that I like to point out when I can, is it's not always what it is so much as what's on it that defines it. So if you understand that, that means that pretty much almost any substrate could be a sign, okay, depending on what we put on it. So that gives us a wide array of products to work with. And I think the more unique you can be with signage, the better for a lot of applications. There are some applications where it doesn't need to jump off the wall, okay, at you. But, you know, I think that getting that message across, being unique is important. And so a couple of questions I'd always ask when I start thinking about talking to a customer is, where will it be used, okay? How large does it need to be? Will it be mounted to a surface or freestanding? And what kind of message is being delivered? I mean, these are a couple of things to think about as we start trying to figure out which substrate we want to use. And David, how many substrates do you have at Conde?
So, you know, some of the basics are things like, of course, metal, the plastic, which we call FRP,
right,
hardboard, which is thin masonite material, MDF, acrylic glass, the Dyflex plastic, which is really thin, the color light film, which is viewable from both sides. So you've got a wide variety of choices, and that's going to be one of the opportunities for the sublimators out there is become familiar with what their options are, so that that you can show the client their choices.
Right.
But for indoor use, you know, lots of all these would be good choices. Mounting should be easy. A few of them are can be single or double-sided. So I think, you know, you've got lots of options. And one of the funny things I'll throw in, you know me, I tend to have a bad case of ADD, is one of the most innovative indoor sublimated signs. You know what that is, Jimmy?
What?
You obviously know it's a trick question. I'm setting you up.
Okay.
Is the new Unisub flooring?
So,
So
oh yeah, I love the flooring.
We have now sublimatable tongue and groove flooring, where you could actually, you know, go into, say, a boutique or an office building. It could be an entrance. It could be a special kids area, and you're actually putting in this flooring to draw significance to this part of the building or this part of your showroom. You name it, and the flooring is quite durable.
Yes.
And so whether it be the floor, we even have ceiling tiles, whether it be the ceiling, the walls, those are all great opportunities to show that message.
You know, the flooring is awesome that the International Sign Association show this past spring. We had a booth there, and I was involved in helping to design and decorate the booth, and it was actually a lot of fun. Without getting too much into it, we basically created a series of lifestyles, and we were trying to show people how signage could fit in. But one of the lifestyles was a zoo. So we were creating it the impact to look like you were going into a zoo, and you had signage and all. And I used the floor panels, and we actually had the graphics done to make the floor panels look like they were a stone sidewalk with a logo for the zoo, kind of looked like it had been sort of etched into that. It was a really cool effect, and it was just, you know, like you said, the tongue and groove floor panels, but what we put on it was just really neat looking. So, gosh, there's just so much you can do with that.
Send Meredith a few of those photographs.
Yeah.
I heard really good things about your booth, and Jimmy was the chief architect, by the way, folks.
Only of the good stuff. Anything that was bad, I didn't have anything to do with. So.
And so I saw pictures of it. I was not at the show, but it was incredibly impressive. And if you think about working your way into a museum, some sort of attraction, indoor, outdoor, and you're able with sublimation to create museum quality signage.
Right.
You can create the best signage in the world, there is no technology that provides a better solution. I mean, it's subsurface decorating, chemically resistant, abrasion resistant, graffiti resistant. Indoors, it's essentially going to last forever.
Yep. Okay, so we use signs for a lot of different reasons. Next slide here will be, oops, it jumped. Sorry, it jumped twice, is identification. And there is that acrylic piece that I was talking about. Meredith got that image in there for us so we could see it today. And that is that curved acrylic piece that actually it was a menu on a table in a restaurant. And it was just so cool. And there it is. Love that.
Yeah, it's very attractive, and that's the color light coating technology on a curved acrylic. Now, folks, before you freak out, you press it flat, and then after you take it out of the press, it's a little bit pliable. You give it a little bit of a twist to start it curving, and then we have a cooling jig that lets gravity do the rest. So it's actually an easy product to do, but the upside is it's very high value to do. And so, you know, coupled with the great products from Universal Woods for whether it could be a wall, a cubicle, a door, you have materials in many cases pre-cut for just about all the standard applications.
Yep, lots and lots of options for identification. Another category is POP, which means point of purchase. And so if you ever notice, typically if you go up to the counter in any type of food establishment where there's maybe you go up to pay, or just to order, they always have different things there to try and get your attention, like, oh, by the way, since you're ordering a sandwich, you know we have the special of the week is the Saigon cinnamon tiramisu. I mean, so it's always just a different messaging that is to get your attention. And the reason I got point of purchase is it's normally placed where you're making that purchase. I mean, and there's lots of different ways to do it with just small pieces. We don't need large pieces. You can see the tiramisu is one of the easel pieces, has a little easel on the back. And then if you look at the one with the macaroons, that is a hinged piece so that, again, it's freestanding. So, you know, very easy to put in place and very visual.
Let me say this, Jimmy, about people looking at these and maybe you don't believe you have the artistic talent to create these kind of samples, and I'm probably in that category. And the point is that there's a lot of great artists out there that I would call them freelance. You can get to them through your community college or just asking around, and all those folks work for a very reasonable amount of money, and you can commission them to create the artwork for you to produce this kind of great quality samples. And I'll tell you what, that is just a fantastic plan to get the job done, as opposed to you struggling with creating something. And Jimmy, you and I were talking before the broadcast about how people will save a penny by working their little heart out for hours on time when they might have had a much easier path by just simply doing it a different way.
Right. Absolutely. Another category is brand awareness, and this is one of these things you really need to emphasize with your customer, that they need to actively remind their customer where they are when they're there. Okay, and that's a big part of what we're doing with signage, is not just saying here is the best coffee in town, but putting that message over and over and over again in front of the customer to remind them where they are. So if they had a good experience, they're going to remember exactly where they were. Now, unfortunately, they had a bad experience there too. So it's up to the proprietor to make sure they get a good experience. But that's very important, is that brand awareness that comes with signage.
If you do a good enough job, as we talked about at the B&B webinar, you have a great opportunity to sell those kind of gift products.
Yes.
That they're going to want to take with them. So
like
creating that brand.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Advertising that pays for itself. That's exactly what you have there. When you have a mug that they can purchase and take home, that's advertising that paid for itself. So then we have banners and flags where we start talking about fabric. And, you know, a lot of these are larger items, but they're, you know, it's, again, depends on what you have or what you have access to. But if you ever walk through a trade show, so many of the products in a trade show are sublimated. The backdrops, the overhead signs, the banners, you know, all those different types of things are sublimated. So the reality is it's just one more direction to go with sublimation. Now, these are some of the signs that we saw in that coffee shop earlier, and one of the things when David was talking about artwork, I'd like everybody to know that the majority of the items that we had in that coffee shop picture are in Creative Studio, so that you can actually make your own sign samples if you like some of those images. But if you're using Creative Studio and you go into the art templates and look under sales samples, you will find all the ones that we used to build out the signage for the coffee shop. And they're yours to use to build your own samples.
Yep.
You know, an interesting thing of where signs appear is architectural. And if you look at the one on the right to start with, the one on the right is obviously lots of panels mounted into a grid, but each individual panel, you know, has an image on it, and then it's reassembled, and it becomes actually a wall. And so architectural typically means it's been designed into a structure. The one on the left is in a museum, but it's actually wall panels that are architectural in design, but graphical in nature. So just one more aspect of what we can do with sublimation in the signage world.
Yeah, Jeff Butler, one of our marketing folks, runs essentially an antique store, and he did a hanging mural from his ceiling by just taking 12 by 12 panels, and it's a really artsy kind of design, really a low cost to it. You tile the images and you print and press, and then he assembled them by punching holes and then key rings. Probably, you know, no more than $200 for upscale kind of business looking for that kind of thing. It'd probably sell for $2,000 or $3,000.
Okay. Really, the last image is back to one we saw a few minutes ago. There's just so much going on there. I just wanted everybody to see it one more time. That this might be a little bit overkill, but the reality is showing all the things we can do with sublimation there. And as I said, many of these images are available in Creative Studio if you wish to use them. I think the key with anything when we're selling into any kind of market like the signage is building yourself a good collection of samples that you can walk in. And me personally, when I build sample kits, if it's going to be, I don't like just random signs. I mean, I like the idea of creating things that are complementary to each other, because for one thing, if I'm showing that to a customer and you're seeing, like example, the coffee shop here, you're like, oh yeah, because you can see how all the different pieces tie together, and a lot of times that leads to, you know, a bigger and better sale. And I always say too, your sample should do the selling for you. If you have really good samples that stimulate people into saying, wow, look at that, and then their mind starts clicking at all the different things that can be done, you're probably going to sell more products than you thought to begin with. And again, just looking over the little things in here, there's actually a clock on the wall that's been sublimated with the brand for the coffee house. So it's almost a little hide and seek if you start looking around and looking deep enough, in this image at all the different things that have been sublimated in there. I mean, it's kind of fun because every time you look at it and you go a little deeper, listen, even though it has nothing to do with signage, this guy's wearing sublimated socks. I just wanted to tell you that. So,
well,
you know.
and also one thing, Jimmy, that doesn't look like it's sublimated is the actual chairs, and sublimating to fabric and upholstering the chair is actually fairly straightforward. And so, you know, you every time you look at something, and as Jimmy knows, you work with projects, you always find things you could even do even greater. And since we can sublimate to fabric or those kinds of materials, great. And we've got a new linen line that we've got everything from coasters to little placemats, big and small. I know there's even napkins out there. So, you know, it's almost never ending.
True. I mean, and with that kind of line of products, and this is one of the things I tell people all the time, is like, listen, spend some time on, you know, in this case, the Conde website. Spend the time on the Conde website looking at the substrates, because if you don't know what's out there to be used, you can't sell it, and it may limit your vision and of what you want to show your customer. So the more that you're aware of, like David, I wasn't aware of your linen line, so as soon as you said that, bingo, it stuck in my head. It's like, I got to go check that out. So, you know, really and truly trying to spend time, and I do spend time on your website. You have a lot of neat stuff, but I still haven't covered it all myself. But
and neither have I, Jimmy. You know, I'll forget a product, and it's like buried treasure. You go, wow, I forgot all about that.
Wow, we carry that. So I got to say, I love going down the hallway in your office building there, where you have so many of the products on the wall. You know, because it's like, there it is. You know, it's like a museum of products. Pretty cool. So if you've never been to Conde, you need to go visit next year when they do the open house. Go check it all out.
We would love to have you.
A couple of resources here. These are just for getting images. I mean, sometimes people ask me, where do you get images that you can use for some of the things? And these are just a couple of sources that you may or may not be aware of, like Shutterstock and iStock Photo and Getty Images. But here you can buy images, buy licenses is what you're doing. You don't really technically own the image. You're buying a license to use it. Just make sure you read the small print so you understand how you can, you know, use it and any restrictions. But this is a place that, especially if you're just building a sample kit, making a good sample kit, and maybe you do want images of food products or anything for that matter, here's a great place to go to be able to get those, to be able to make those sample signs that you can then take and show to a customer.
Yeah, and just, you know, we could talk all day, but just a couple of thoughts, random here. But I think there are a number of what I'll call signs that you could standardize on and pretty much sell, you know, just about anybody. For instance, imagine a sign that just has some kind of cool, neat design, but it has a place where you're going to put your Wi-Fi password for either your business or your dorm room, you know, whatever. Right. Everybody's going to buy one. Another big trend, and I think I'm going to go make a sign after this to show it. I probably get Sprite. Sprite is just so talented here at Conde. Is to take the Chromlux metal and stack it. So if you think about, could be a menu item showing pictures of the menus. It could be different things. You have a bigger piece of metal, and then you have floating on the front of it smaller pieces. What a high value, just gorgeous looking presentation. And we all know, you know, at least in America, is we live on the presentation. We live on the packaging. If it has good packaging, a good presentation, certainly we're going to have more of a positive attitude. But I think best of all, we think it's worth more.
True, and if the end user thinks it's worth more, it is worth more. I mean, that's a simple fact of life. So anyway, that brings me to the end.
Reemphasize one more point, and that is about the dry erase.
Yep.
That is so valuable that you know, the Chromolux Unisub, and I think most of the products, but because those are typically your go-to sign materials, they're going to be, you know, ideal for dry erase kind of stuff. What kind of questions we have, Jimmy? I think we probably answered quite a few of them during the thing here. I do have one one product that I'd like to give away to the folks that have watched the video. So on your next order, I want to give you one of our cool Dyflex little tag hangers. So our Dyflex material, excuse me, not the Dyflex. Yeah, the Dyflex material. That material you can put on your door handle. You could put on your rear view mirror of your car. Those kinds of things. And that product's called a Dyflex hang tag, and that part number is DFX 0034W. That's DFX 0034W. And we'll give you one with your next order of $100 or more. And we hope you'll get familiar with some of these materials, because the best part is often you can buy these products in sheet form or bulk from us, and you could fabricate them locally. Like, for instance, if you own a laser or have a friend that has a laser, they can be cut. And that really leads to my really last point, is that we can often fabricate products for you. So if a client needs a particular shaped piece of metal, hardboard or MDF or some of these others, often we can help you with that. And you know, that's what people want. They want the value there of some custom signage, and the shape just goes to one level beyond just the graphic design. And so from the ceiling to the floor to every nook and cranny, there's going to be those profit opportunities for interior signage. And really all you need to do is stroll around, take some notes about what you're seeing, and then figure out what clients you're selling to, maybe make them a sample. Everybody wants a personalized sample with, say, their company name or their name on them, and you provide that sample to them, and that's going to open the door. And then the last point is, every product that you're going to make sure it has your reorder information somewhere on it. Could be sublimated to the back side. Many of the products can be sublimated to the back side, but just make sure that as time goes on, it'll be very easy for them to remember who provided. And I do have one more point. I think I would talk forever, and that is sell my favorite product. Jimmy, do you know, do you remember what I claim is my favorite product?
I'm sure you told me. I don't remember, so I'm just going to let you tell me again.
Name badges. So
yes.
Name badges are my favorite product, because it's the only product that you only need to sell once, and then you can just sit back for the reorders. And so Name badge, of course, is a great B2B kind of client, and it certainly goes along with almost every interior signage sale that I can think of. There's somebody there that needs a great quality name badge. So Jimmy, again, thank you for being part of this webinar. You're always amazing in your expertise, and we look forward to the next one. So Jimmy, any last comments?
Don't have any last comments. By the way, we don't have questions, but we actually have several people just thanking you for the tag hanger, thanking for the information, et cetera, et cetera. So always good to hear feedback from those who attend, and I appreciate everybody that sent feedback in.
All right, till we meet again, this has been David Gross with Conde Systems and Jimmy Lang with Sawgrass. We thank you for your participation.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.